Hi, this is Shauna, and I want to welcome you to Living in This Space. Real talk, because hey, we're all just living in this space we call life, right? It's messy, it's hard, and sometimes it's the most joyous thing we can experience. I want you, my listener, to have a place where the conversation is real and honest. I hope we can spend this time together, validating, sharing, and experiencing all the feels together with whatever topic is on the agenda for the day. Let's dive in. Hi, and welcome back. Well, I am so honored to have my sweet friend Laura Hoddle on today. I've wanted you to hear from Laura since I first started this podcast because I knew that hearing her story, her journey, her joy and pain would impact you no matter where you are in your life. You know, listeners, there are those in life who have a gift to share. They tell their story and you're drawn in. You feel deeply when you listen and you're moved. Laura is one of those special people with that gift. So Laura, welcome, and I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Laura, I am so honored that you would be open to talking to us about your journey over the last 12 years. We met about 12 years ago and my daughter became friends with Victor and Martin in high school. Or for the listeners who don't know how your journey began with these two precious young men, I would love for you to give them some backstory on Victor and Martin. And then I would love for you to tell us just a bit about who they were as teenage boys.
Sure. So it's kind of a long story, as you know. So I will do my very best to condense the backstory. So Jay and I, my husband Jay, we were helpers with our church's youth group, and a young lady that went to youth group with us. She reached out to us one day and said, "Hey, I have a friend who would really like to come to youth group one night, but he doesn't have a ride. Can you guys pick him up?" And so we did. And actually, it was 12 years ago this month that this all happened. And so, anyway, on our way to church, we drove by, picked up this young man. We found out that he had an identical twin. The twin did not join us that night, but we met Martin, and we took Martin to church, to the youth group, had a great time. And when we met Martin, you know, he just had this great big smile. You know, when we first met him, here comes this kid walking out of a house and just beautiful smile, very happy, very eager to be in conversation, very intelligent, very well spoken. And he was just a joy to be around. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I had my son with me from a previous marriage. So Jay and I kind of co-parented my son, and I think he was probably 12. So but they connected, and it was a really good time that night. And anyway, time passes. Martin stays in touch with us. He wants to come back to youth group. And then eventually Victor emerged from the home to join us. And what was funny, Shauna, I don't know if you know this little detail, but the reason why Victor did not join us for the first couple of times was because he was enamored with your daughter. And I guess they were talking on the phone, and he wanted to be left alone. And so that's why Victor did not join us for a couple of weeks. And so anyway, bottom line, Victor eventually joined us. And, you know, now we have this dynamic duo of these two identical twin boys that were just beautiful and precious and well-spoken and kind and loving. And that's how we met them. And fast forward a little bit, some things weren't quite right in their home. We kind of got the gist of that. And my background is as a teacher, and I'm very well versed with the laws of children, and to include neglect, abuse, whatnot. There were just some things that weren't right, but there was nothing obvious at the moment legally. And so Jay and I just continued to take them to church and pour into them. And had a great several months, and then some things drastically changed. Do you want me to continue and share that piece?
I do, because that was my next question for you. Just if you would share a little bit how it unfolded that you adopted the boys.
Okay. So, yes, so from August until the end of November, literally just kind of would hang out with them. And they would sometimes very sheepishly ask for help, like they didn't have the school supplies they needed. They were in the AIG and AP and honors high school classes, very, very intelligent, very, very bright children. It was very obvious nobody was really at home for them. And come to find out, mom had left, the mother had left, and the dad was basically never there. He might pop in every once in a while. So they were living alone. They were like kind of raising themselves. We found out that they were actually adopted. They had been legally adopted when they were about 2 years old. They had been taken from their home for severe abuse, neglect. They were hospitalized at age like 22 months. So we were learning all these things about them, but they were put up for adoption as basically as toddlers once they recovered from the hospitalization that they endured. And as the fall progressed, as we were getting close to Christmas, like I said, there were little things that we could tell weren't quite right. We did have contact with the father, very standoffish contact, but contact. And we would say, hey, is it okay if we take them out to eat? Is it okay if we go to the movies? And the father really wasn't very present anyway. Like I said, the boys literally were living in the house by themselves. And so Thanksgiving came. Again, this was all 2012. Thanksgiving came, and Jay and I think Andrew was with us. Sometimes he spent time with his biological father, but we went up to Virginia to see Jay's mother. And come to find out, the boys over Thanksgiving were alone. They had no food. They had nothing. We were horrified for them. And so when we left that Thanksgiving, Thanksgiving comes on a Thursday. So you have like that weekend, that Thanksgiving weekend. And we left Virginia to come home. And Jay was like, we got to get them. Like, we got to get them. And so Jay took them to a movie and we fed them. And so that was like the very end of November. And then December comes. And Martin called me one night and said, my mom's coming tomorrow. She's said that she wants to meet with us, meaning, him and Victor. And so I'm like, oh, really? Okay, well, maybe this will be good. And he's like, Miss Laura, you don't understand. You don't know what she's like. You don't know what's getting ready to happen. And I'm like, well, you guys you're almost 16, because they were 15. You guys are almost 16. Just hang in there. Just hang in there. Because again, legally, there's not a lot that can be done unless it's very severe, very profound. And they were adopted by this family. And so I was like, Martin, just hang in there, and just trying to be positive, right? And give the feeling of hope. And anyway, so December 5th comes, and I'm getting ready to go to Target and grab some things for school. And Jay and my son Andrew, they're at church and working on the Christmas program. And Martin calls me, and the mother had come and gone. Apparently they had gotten into a knockdown drag out. I don't really know everything that she said. I mean, I remember some of it, but it was a lot of threats, a lot of, you will never see the light of day. I'm coming home. You're, and I'm paraphrasing from Martin, but it was very negative. It was very, controlling, very defeating, scary. because here's two boys that want to live life,
Yeah.
and they're and basically the conversation was, I'm returning, I'm moving back in, and I will have full control of your lives, and you will not leave this house except for school. And they were horrified. And and again, what do you do? And
Right.
so I said to Martin, I said, where's Victor in all of it? Like, where's Victor? And he said, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Your house is like, I don't know, 1,300 square feet. How do you lose your twin brother? Where's your
Right.
brother? And he said, I don't know. I don't know where he went. And so next thing, I do is I hang up with Martin, and I'm horrified. I'm really worried for these children that wanted so much out of life and deserve so much. And so I called Victor, and he answered, but he sounded like he was a million miles away. And so what you got to know is December 5th, like I said, it was dark because it was about, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 o'clock, maybe. But December, it gets dark early.
Right.
It was cold. Living in North Carolina wasn't freezing, but it was cold, and it was raining that night.
Mm.
And he sounded like he was a million miles away. And I said, Victor, are you okay? And he wouldn't answer me in a normal answer. He wasn't like, yes, I'm fine. He just had this like robotic voice
Right.
of what he could not endure anymore. And it really scared me.
Yeah.
And I kept saying, where are you? Are you okay? Where are you? And he was kind of breathing heavily. And bottom line, he was walking. He was in my neighborhood. He had walked maybe 2 miles in the rain and the dark and the cold. He walked out of the house when the mom came in and exploded. He just walked out the back door, and he walked to our house. And so he finally told me like where he was specifically. And I said, okay, based on where you are, you should be here in about, 15 minutes. If you're not here in 20 minutes though, I'm going to come get you. And he was very silent. He didn't say anything. And finally he agreed. He finally said, okay. So I'm pacing the house, and, and Shauna, like, the Christmas tree is up and the Christmas lights are on. It's a beautiful time of year, and it's a season of hope. It's a season of love and, and excitement. And here's this kid
Yeah.
who is desperate for something and is walking to me, to my house. And that's a whole nother thing that's hard for me to comprehend, like what that meant for him to choose to come to me, and that's hard. It's a hard thing when you realize an impact that you've had on someone. Sometimes I think we as humans, sometimes we want to dance around that. We don't want to acknowledge things because it comes with a big, like big expectations, or fear, or what do I do now? Right? What's next?
Right.
And so I'm just kind of like, okay, what do I do? I'm going to clean the kitchen counter while I wait, just nervous energy. And I don't even remember if I texted Jay and told him. I just don't remember. But I mean, Jay knew that the mother was coming in to have this meeting with the boys. And bottom line, Victor shows up. And I'll never forget the scene, because if you can kind of think again about Christmas, there's Christmas lights on a lot of the houses. And our front yard, we have the spotlight the house, and the Christmas trees. It's just, it's pretty. And I open the door, and because the light's coming in from behind, all I can see is this dark silhouette in front of me. And so you have this contrast of the brightness of Christmas and this dark shadow in front of me. And he came in, and I was very gentle with him. And I'm like, hey, honey, I've been teaching for a long time. I love kids. I love kids.
Yeah.
I love my classroom. I love my classroom environment. And so for me to transition that with him, like to apply that feeling was nothing. Hey, sweetheart, come on in. Let's get you by the fire. and he had his backpack on his back, and he was very robotic, and he just walked in like this robot, and he was continuing with this mantra, Shauna, of I can't keep walking this facade. I can't, and Shauna, you met him. He was so
Yes.
bright. The
Yes.
vocabulary was so big, and
Mhm.
but he had this robotic mantra of what he could no longer live through. And my heart began to pound out of my chest because I'm thinking, he's suicidal.
Mhm.
This again is bigger than I know what to do with. I'm
Right.
trained in this. And I'm like, so I'm sitting on the couch and he's in front of me in the recliner, just sitting there. And he's very broken. He's very broken. He's almost pale. And so I get my cell phone and I have it under a pillow that's in my lap. And so he's sitting in front of me in this recliner, and he's very quiet and but robotic
Yeah.
again. Not saying anything, but he's very soft spoken in this robotic voice of what he can no longer do. And I have this pillow over my lap, and I have my cell phone, and I start to text the youth pastor that Joe and I volunteered with, and I basically said, Martin and Victor had a meeting with their mom, their adoptive mom. I don't know what's happened. It's not good. Victor is here. So I give him the scenario. And I really didn't think that he would see the text message because they were all working on the Christmas program.
Right.
And so I thought, well, nobody's going to help me. Well, he responded. The pastor responded super fast and said, bring him to me now. And so then I'm like, how am I going to get Victor
Yes.
to go with me? And so I kind of did my, let's take a little bit of church. Let's see if pastor can help us. And he agreed. We got in the car. I either called or texted Jay and said, we're here. This is what's going on. And anyway, bottom line, Jay went to get Martin and brought Martin over to the pastor's office. And Shauna, it was defeating. It was devastating what they were going through. Victor was still very robotic, but at one point the mother called and completely bawled him out over the phone. And the pastor and I could hear it. And so here's this triangle of us, the pastor sitting across from me, and Victor's to my left. And so it make this perfect triangle in conversation. And the pastor and I are staring at each other from across his desk, and our eyes are bugging out of our head because of the things that this woman was saying to Victor. Here he's sitting here suicidal.
Right.
Because of her. And I will say it, because of her.
Right.
Some people dance around things and they don't know what to say. And I'm going to stand up for these kids because of her and what they went through and what they were put through and this traumatic abuse. He was suicidal because he said he couldn't live it anymore. And it's hard to put into words because I remember him saying to her, I'm fine, Mom, but I'm okay. I'm okay. Because she was saying, where are you? And why aren't you at the house like I told you to be? And it's like an olive branch. He was reaching out to her, hoping that she would care that he was okay.
Right.
That never left her lips. And she continued to berate him. And it broke my heart that he continued to say, Mom, I'm okay. She didn't care that he was okay. And the words that were spewing out of her mouth were just the cussing. It was horrific. And anyway, bottom line, Martin ended up finally showing up. Jay brought him and we all sat there. And it was like, what do we do? What's going to happen, right? So we brought them back to our house. And the next thing we know, the police were involved. We ended up calling the police because of some of the threats and things that were happening. We returned them to their home using a police escort because we were afraid for their lives. What we did not realize at the time is they were on a watch case already.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were on a watch case already through the social through the social worker at school. There was a lot of things that had already happened, and so we returned them home using a police escort. And then I was just devastated for them. I thought we would never see them again. And that was the night of December 5th. It's so amazing how God can show up on things. I
Right.
mean, sometimes we don't see God show up the way we think we're going to, or the
Hmm.
way a situation we feel deserves for God to show up the way that we want it to happen. But the most unbelievable thing happened the next day. And like I said, I'm a teacher. December 6th came. This was 2012. I was taking my fifth grade students on a field trip that next day. I did not sleep the night before. I was devastated for these boys. We were going to a field trip to the high school,
Hmm.
to their high school, to see a drama production that the theater department was putting on. And one of my students that I had was the social workers of the high school as her daughter. So you kind of see this little connection that's happening.
Yes.
And I was in touch with a school social worker that night, that morning, the morning of December 6th. Um, and so anyway, it was just amazing. And so I show up with all my students in the parking lot of the high school, and Martin walks out to me. And I did not even expect those kids to be at school, but they were so disciplined. They got themselves up. They got on the
Yeah.
bus. They went to school because they cared about themselves. And that's a whole nother story that I could share with young people. But anyway, Martin walks out with the principal, and I start sobbing because I really didn't think I was ever going to see these kids again. And my teammates, my team teachers all fifth grade teachers, they're like, "Go, Laura!" So I go to the social worker's office, and the other teachers, they take care of my students. And I sit there with Martin, and Victor was still very robotic. He could not hardly speak. And the principal was in there, social worker, me, and then the twins, and the pastor, because it was intervention time
Right.
at this point. This is way above my pay grade.
Hmm.
The social worker, I'll never forget, very calmly in all of our conversations, she finally just said, "Boys, what is it that you want?" And Martin was standing across the room from me. And Martin had a huge personality. And he was very outspoken. He was very loud. But very loving. And he also just kind of would say things sometimes. And he looked at me from across the room and pointed dead at me and said, "I want her to be my mom."
Oh, Laura.
And I teared up,
Hmm.
and I was like, "What do you say?" Because that's never going to happen.
Right.
They've already been adopted.
Hmm.
They're not up for adoption. And I just was floored. And so I looked at the pastor, he kind of, he was picking up what I was putting down, and he's like, "Oh, Martin, I don't know if you want that. Like, her nickname is the Warden. You don't really want her." And I'm like, "Oh, Martin, I'm kind of tough. Like, watch what you ask for, because I'm a very
Yeah.
straightforward, disciplined, call it like it is person, and you probably don't really want me." You probably don't really want me. But it was penetrating.
Sure.
And that afternoon, the social worker called the dad and basically said, "Victor is suicidal. He needs to be on suicide watch. And if you do not do anything about this, and Victor hurts himself, you and the mother will be held accountable for his death in a court of law at this point, because you've been warned, you've been notified that he needs mental health help. Things need to change."
Hmm.
And so the dad came and picked up Martin and Victor from school in the afternoon, and went straight to the emergency room with Victor for mental health services. And so Martin is calling me that evening, like giving me a play by play. And I couldn't even function. What so many of our children in our world are going through, people just don't know.
No, they don't.
Yeah, kids should never go through what they go through
Right.
at that point, adults. And, and again, hands off. There's nothing I can do, right? And so I'm just listening to Martin. I'm like, stay strong. You got this. Something's gonna happen, and then I'm in my brain like crying, like, God, like, what in the world's gonna happen? And so next thing I know, at like 1 a.m, Martin sends me a text message and they're discharging them. And he said to me, Mom, we know how to say what needs to be said to these mental health people because they're not going to help us. No one's going to help us.
Right.
And I was devastated.
Yeah.
So I don't sleep that night. So now it's December 7th. Sometimes things just unfold in the most literally like the Red Sea,
Right.
the Red Sea parts. And I'm at work. I'm devastated. I'm thinking, again, I'm never going to hear from these boys again. And my husband, I don't know, calls me, texts me something. I think he texts me and says, the father has reached out to me and wants to see me over lunch, over the lunch break. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like what could this be? And Shauna, I'm sorry. I was scared.
Yes.
I was scared for Jay's life. And I don't mean that in any way, except you don't know what people are going to do.
Right.
We know we were dealing with children that were in an abusive situation. They've been abused their entire lives. Not only were they abused by the biological parents, but they had been adopted into abuse and had been sitting in abuse with the adoptive parents for 14 years.
Right.
And so I was scared. So, but I'm teaching, I'm doing my day, and lunchtime comes. And so I take my students to lunch, and I'm literally just a ball of nerves. And I'm in the lunchroom with my students, and my principal comes and says, Laura, you have a phone call, but you need to go to my office to take it. Okay. I was about done at that point.
I can't imagine.
I was like, my husband has been killed.
Mm-hmm.
So I walk to her office, and she takes my students. And anyway, I pick up the phone line, and it's a school social worker from the high school. And again, I teach her daughter, so like we're beginning to have this amazing relationship. And she says, Laura, I have you on speakerphone, and there's somebody here that needs to speak to you. And again, I can't. Like, I'm done. I'm toast, y'all. I can't function. My heart's pounding out of my chest. And then I hear my husband, and he says something to the effect of, how would you like to have these two knuckleheads as your sons?
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, wait, what? Like what? And basically, the father and my husband, they never even had lunch. As soon as Jay arrived in the parking lot of the place where they were going to meet, he said, again, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, we don't want our boys. Do you want them?
Oh.
And Jay's response, and it was pretty fast. I mean,
Yeah.
Jay said it was literally like 5 minutes and it was over. And Jay said, wait, like what? What do you mean? And he said, we don't want them. Do you want them? And Jay said, are you asking me if Laura and I want to finish raising your children for you? And he's like, yeah. And Jay's response was immediate. Yes, we do want them. We absolutely want them. And we both, even though I wasn't there, yes, my heart was the same. Absolutely. So that was the phone call. And I could not believe it. And so I went through the rest of my day, and I went and picked them up after school. And they were under an order to get everything out of the house or it would be destroyed. And, I'm excited, but forgetting that these boys have been handed another layer of trauma.
Exactly.
And they bring their things out in boxes, and it was sad. It was a very sad scene that they bring their things out, and we drive home. And I think Andrew had a little Christmas party that night, and I took him to Walmart and I bought him a toothbrush,
Hmm.
bought them underwear, and I bought them socks, and I bought them all the things that they needed. And that was December 7th, 2012. And DSS showed up at our house a couple of days later and said they were taking them away, that we could not have them, that we were not in the foster care system, and that we could not adequately provide for them. And I'm like, oh, yes, because they've been adequately provided for in the adoptive home that you put them in.
Right.
We hired an attorney because they were going to be sent to a group home to age out, basically.
Oh, Laura.
And I'm like, over my dead body.
Right. Of
I
course.
don't know what I'm going to do, but over my dead body,
Hmm.
are you them? And they're going to age out in a system. And so we hired an attorney, and God parted the Red Sea again, because DSS had given us until like January 7th or 6th. It was basically a 30-day window from when all that happened. And think about it. You have Christmas, you have New
Yep.
Year's. Nothing moves in the court system. Nothing.
Right.
We're not foster people. We have nobody in our corner. We had nobody in our corner.
Yeah.
We hire this lawyer, and we full blast Christmas, get them everything they've ever wanted in their entire lives, go into debt. Shouldn't have done it. Put it all on the credit card, right? And we just make it a Christmas to remember, not knowing.
Yeah. You didn't know if this would be their last one with a family.
Yeah. And so December 31st comes. A judge wants to hear the court case on December 31st. What courtroom is open on New Year's Eve?
Yeah.
And here's the other thing. It was their 16th birthday.
Mm.
And a judge comes in and wants to hear the court case. Our attorney goes in, lays it all out. He does not bat an eye. He assigns them to our care full time.
Wow.
On their 16th birthday, they were given to us.
Wow, Laura.
We started 2013 with them.
Hmm.
Lots of trauma, lots of up and downs, but lots of excitement. And we had an incredible, incredible year with them.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And so there's how we got them.
But what a story to hear of, I mean, the grace and the love that you showed these boys when they needed it the most. And they were fine men. I mean, I used to talk to Frank and I said, they are so well mannered, so respectful. They were brilliantly smart. And just for an outsider, you would not have known what they were going through on the inside. They just kept it hidden.
I remember when, Victor came to meet with you and your
Hmm.
husband, and, dating your daughter, and just, the things that come with teenage love. And I just remember in all the hardships and all the errors, I was so proud of Victor for speaking to you and Frank about such hard things
Yeah,
with dignity, honor, and respect.
right.
And I hope that you feel that same way
Mhm.
about that meeting that we had together, because it was hard. It was hard stuff. And
Yes.
um, I would just remember when Victor would own up to mistakes and he would talk about things. I'm like, what teenage boy does this?
Yeah.
What teenage boy says, I'm sorry, I made a mistake,
Hmm.
please forgive me, or I need to do better,
Yeah.
and I need to tell you guys
Hmm.
that I need to do better. Like, and he didn't have anybody modeling that for him in life except Christ.
Laura, that's the thing. We live in a society where so many excuses are made. And here are two children who came from horrific situations on both sides of their adoption. And they could have just gone any way with this, but they chose to love God, to get up every morning and go to school. They always looked, clean and presentable. They didn't cross over these lines into a wayward kid.
The drugs,
No,
the all the things that they put
right.
together. They lived in a neighborhood with gangs.
Right.
They did not join.
Right.
They could have joined because they needed the love.
Yes.
And we know that gangs are not real love, but kids don't know that. When they're
They don't
looking
know that.
and they're looking to be a part of
Hmm.
something, I don't know. As I continue to unpack everything that's happened, because as you know, and I know we'll get into, Jay and I had to walk a very tight line and we could not veer because of everything that happened. And unpacking the story is a lot.
Yes.
And I just look at, and I realize that people have different thoughts and different beliefs. And I totally understand that. But I see the impact that Jesus had on my because they chose him.
Hmm.
So they made Jesus is a gentleman, God is a gentleman.
Yeah.
But my boys chose that relationship. And so I saw so much happening in who they were because they chose
Yes.
relationship with Jesus and God and what that looked like. And you could see it all over them,
Hmm.
even despite the hardships and the struggles and everything that's to come, everything that came, you still could see it no matter
Right.
what.
Well, we're going to move on to some really deep, hard things. But before we do that, I want to ask you if you would just share a few of those precious moments that we take for granted that these boys did not once they were in your care and were part of your family.
So they had never been to the mountains. And so in the fall, it was like September, October of 2013, and I secretly made reservations. I'm from the mountains of Virginia. So we're here in North Carolina in the flat sand hills of North
Yeah.
Carolina. But I knew all the fishing spots in the mountains of Virginia where I'm from. And so there was this cute little area. I reserved a cabin for a weekend, and we went fishing for a weekend up in a stocked trout pond, and stocked by the state of Virginia, and it's right by a hatchery, right by a fish hatchery, and so it's where I used to take when I babysat. I would take my kids. I babysit. We'd go fishing there.
Yeah.
But this wonderful place had cabins, and we just had the most incredible time. They were like little. I kept looking at these boys that were now 16, and I'm like, they're little. They're trapped 3-year-olds. They're little
Yes.
3-year-olds that are trapped. They've never been able to get out. They've never been able to run up and say, "Mommy, hug me."
Mhm.
They've never been able to sit in your lap and have their hair stroked or their face stroked or be rocked to sleep and to be that TLC that small children need.
Mhm.
They never have. And to me, that's who they were.
Yeah.
They were these little 3-year-old boys that were trapped.
Hmm.
Had this most incredible time fishing, and then they'd never been to the beach. So in July of everything happened in 2013. In July of 2013, we rented like a condo, whatever,
Hmm.
at Myrtle Beach, and we took them to the beach, and oh my gosh, we just had the best time. And I hired a photographer, and we all got matching outfits, and we had photography on the beach, family photos, and and I'll never ever forget. We just had the most beautiful photos, and when we were at the end of it, Victor grabbed my hand when we were walking on the beach, and he was so excited. And again, it's this 3-year-old bursting with excitement, and he said, "Looks like we're a real family now." We had never had family photos taken.
Right.
Nobody had ever wanted a photo of them. And I'm like, I want all the photos of you.
Yes.
I'm going to hang you on my refrigerator. And I'll never forget him so just gently grabbing my hand. And that same trip, we had gone out to eat one night at a restaurant, and it was kind of like a family style restaurant, but we had our own table, but there were families everywhere, and the waitress was kind of back and forth. And she came over to our table. Of course, there's 5 of us because there's my
Hmm.
husband, Andrew, who was the best little brother. I have to give him a shout out. He was the best automatic little brother. Andrew, guess what? You're a little brother now.
Uh-huh.
He took it like a champ.
He was excited, wasn't he?
Very excited. And He did great. He did great sharing everything
Mhm.
and just sharing love and which is what they needed. He
Yes.
gave them what they needed as a, 13-year-old kid. He knew that he had to share and he did. And so but anyway, the five of us were sitting at the dinner table at this restaurant, the three boys and Jay and me. And the waitress comes over, she's starting to take the orders and she goes to the boys first and Jay hesitates. He pauses and he goes, "We're going to start with the mommy first." And because Jay's wanting to instill manners.
Mhm.
The boys had manners,
Yes.
but Jay is amazing. He is the most incredible man ever. And he wants to model what is right. And so, because he's selfless and he wanted to model
Right.
selflessness, but he just does it automatically. And so he goes, "We're going to start with the mommy first." And the waitress goes, "The mommy? How old were you?" And then she looks at me, how old were you when you had them anyway?
Oh my gosh, Laura.
And without missing a beat,
Hmm.
I said 23, which would have been the truth. If I had birthed them, I would have
Right.
been. And she goes, "Oh." Victor was sitting on my right. He reached under the table and grabbed my knee and squeezed my knee. And after she took our orders, when she walked away, he said, "Nobody's ever claimed me before." So, again, there's another layer of what children go through. And here's a 16-year-old that's never been wanted before. And I'm so thankful that I didn't even bat an eye and that I was able to spew out that answer to that snarky lady.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm glad she was snarky
Yeah.
because it made something it was another revelation, but it also solidified our love for Martin and Victor, and that I didn't say, "Well, they're not mine," or, I didn't, I was 23, you
Right.
know, um,
You just claimed them without hesitation. They'd never had that.
and, so our first year, they got involved in the marching band and they
Hmm.
both helped with that. And they were both incredibly musically talented, but had never had that harnessed. It just, you name it.
Yeah.
There's so many things. And
Yeah.
I'll end with this. When school started in August or September, or whenever it was that year, Victor wrote me a letter, or I guess it was really for Jay and me, I should say. And he said, in that letter, he said, "I'm going to start this school year with the hope that I've never had before in my entire life." And he went on to talk about his dedication to his academics, his dedication to just the school environment, to being a better person, to the excitement that starting a school year he's never had before. Because,
Right.
we got them halfway through their sophomore year. We're starting the junior year.
Hmm.
He wrote this most beautiful letter thanking us. And it's just really amazing. And
Yeah.
I would, as a teacher, it's like I want to tell all the children in the world, guys, you might have rough moments, but pour into who you are through your academics because that will change you,
Yes.
and Victor and Martin knew that
Hmm.
automatically. But Victor so beautifully thanked thanked us for what we had gifted him in the hope of a new academic year that he had never
Yeah.
experienced with that kind of promise before. And I treasure that letter.
I know you do. What a precious gift he gave you. And
It was.
I'm so glad that you have that. Laura, I know this isn't easy, and I so appreciate you pulling up some of these memories for us because there's so many out there who don't know Victor and Martin and don't just can't even imagine how precious they were. And everybody that met them knows it for sure. We are going to. Um, I want you to share. I so don't know how to introduce this. I want you to share what came next. you have this beautiful time with these boys. They finally have a family that loves them. They finally have everything they've probably always dreamed about. And y'all are settling into this beautiful little family. Andrew has big brothers, and, Victor and Martin have parents who love them. And then tragedy strikes.
Yeah. And I want to add, like, there's no manual
No.
to walk through. And including, like, what I mean is, like, even this adoption thing, Victor continued to be suicidal a couple of times in that first year, but he was blossoming by the time school was starting. It was beautiful. One night I walked in to his bedroom, and I did not know it, but he was contemplating the act of suicide. I just didn't know it at that moment. And you know, Martin was nowhere in the room. Martin and Victor, what a lot of people don't know, Martin and Victor fought a lot, and their brothers do, but they had a lot of trauma behind their fighting. And Martin had gotten mad at Victor, and Victor was in the bedroom that we had for them. And I tried to talk Victor out of whatever he was saying. He was like in another mantra type thing, and I knew it wasn't good, but I didn't know what to do.
Right.
And I had a whisper inside of me, and it was God. It was a God thing. It was another God thing. It was another parting of the Red Sea. I just didn't know it. And it was the voice was, sing it to him. And I'm like, what? And it was, sing it to him. And I knew what it was. And a lot of mamas, we sing, You Are My Sunshine. And I used to sing that to Andrew when he was a baby. And so I heard in my heart, sing it. And I said in my brain, no, I am not, because that's embarrassing. And I heard it again, sing it. And it was with a little bit of force.
Right.
And so I said to Victor, I want you to sit down with me. And I'm going to, he ended up laying down on his bed. I sat on the edge of the bed, and he just kind of laid there, and I stroked his head. I said, I don't want you to make fun of me. I'll just bear with me for a moment. I was so nervous. And I started singing to the 16-year-old boy, You are my Victor, my only Victor.
Mm-hmm.
You make me happy. The skies are gray. And I continued, and, please don't take my Victor away.
Right.
And I didn't realize how profound those words were. I didn't fully realize until later that he was contemplating suicide at that moment when I walked in.
Yeah.
And we got through that. And he calmed down. And the next time we were at church, he got up in front of the entire congregation because he asked to share something. And he shared that story. And he shared that I did not know what he was contemplating, but that I sang to him like a child needs its mother.
Yeah.
That it changed him forever. And I'm so thankful, because what came next were some of the things that people never want to hear. And we've walked through all the things that people never want to hear in their lives. And at Thanksgiving, we went on a cruise. We went on a family cruise. We had already had this cruise booked for Jay and Andrew and me for Thanksgiving. And so we had to add
two more
tickets, and we went, and it was so exciting. Oh my gosh, it was the best time. And Victor and Martin both grew in so many ways, especially Victor. And because, again, Victor, well, Martin hid a lot of his trauma, which we'll get to later, and we did not know it. Victor's, you could see more. And Victor was actually healing, because we had this beautiful year together, and it was still hard. And we tried counseling with them, and it didn't work too well. I mean, again, there's no manual for this. You just do your best.
Right.
So we are on the cruise and having a good time. And Martin and Victor are bickering again about all kinds of things, and they get into it over stuff. Um, at one point, we're in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I look at Martin. I'm like, "Stop being a butthole." And again, I'm a teacher. Stop
Yeah.
being a your brain. Like, so, oh, you're being a butthole. We're on vacation. Stop. Stop being a butthole to your brother. And, but we make it through. We have the most incredible time together. And we get off the ship. And it's like, I think it's December 1st because Thanksgiving came really late that year. We get off the ship December 1st. Get back to school on Monday. Victor was the star wrestler. He was unbelievable.
Mhm.
And he goes to his wrestling practices and his matches and all that. He gets hit in the head at a practice, and he comes home with this really big goose egg in the middle of his forehead, and his teeth go into the back of the head of the other wrestler. And the kid, I think he had to have stitches, if I'm not mistaken. I don't really remember, but it was a big hit.
It was, yeah.
But they're both fine, right? Okay, so that happens, and then Victor comes home a couple days later from another wrestling match or whatever. It's a Wednesday night. It was December. It was December 11th, and he said, "We're eating dinner," and he goes, "Mom, I don't feel real well. My neck is bothering me. I have these things in my neck, and I think they're my lymph nodes, but they're always sticking out, but they've gotten really hard and they hurt." And his goose egg, by the way, is healed up at this point. It's gone. The abrasion, he had a big abrasion on his forehead, but it's gone because a couple days had passed. And I said, "Oh, I feel his neck," and they are. He's got some really like mega lymph nodes that are hard. And so I'm like, okay. So I said, "Well, you know what? I'll call the doctor tomorrow morning." So Thursday comes and I do, and we get a same day appointment, and she knows all about Martin and Victor, and she's so good with them. And so I take Victor, and we're there, and she said, "Yeah, that's kind of unusual. You have some fluid in your ears, like you've got some fluid building, and so I'm a little worried. We're going to the weekend. I think that you might be developing an ear infection, and your lymph nodes are going into overtime trying to stop it." So that seemed plausible. So
Sure.
she put some on an antibiotic to make sure that fluid doesn't, get infected. And that was that. So we come home like 5. Oh, she does a CBC. She does blood work. There's nothing there, no high white blood count, nothing like that. But she's still a little nervous. So anyway, we come home, and midnight comes, and everybody's asleep. Martin comes and wakes Jay and me up, and he said, "Victor's in the bed, curled up in a ball crying, and he's rocking back and forth. He's in a lot of pain." And I'm like, "What?" and we go running down the hallway, and yeah, there's Victor. And Shauna, every lymph node in his face, you can even see his ears.
Oh,
His
Laura.
face is so swollen with, we have a lot of lymph nodes.
Yeah.
You have clusters of lymph nodes, and then you have like just a few here and there in the face. You could not even see his ears. When you look at somebody face front, you can see their ears on the side, right? You could not see his ears because the lymph nodes were sticking out so much. And I mean, no wonder he was in pain.
Right. What a dramatic change.
Just a few hours. And so Jay takes him to the ER, and I stay at home with the boys. And they come back probably like 4 or 5 in the morning, which is pretty fast for an ER visit.
Yeah.
And they basically said, "You've already been to the doctor. You have antibiotics. Go home." And that's kind of typical for our ER here at this particular hospital. And I was kind of like, okay, well, maybe they're right. Like, maybe whatever's going on, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
right? If you don't know, you don't know. And so I keep Victor home the next day. Of course, he's 16. I go to work because, Andrew goes to school. Martin goes to school. Oh, and by the way, even though the boys are 16, they had never gotten their permit. So they couldn't drive.
Mhm.
Jay, they should have been driving, which would have really helped get like Martin to school. But we're doing this dance. If Jay has to work in another county, I am working where I'm working. I got to get Andrew to a private school. You got to get all these kids to these different places. So
Right.
a lot of parents know the struggle of that. And but I leave Victor at home because he's fine. Like, he's feeling better. The swelling has gone down. He's feeling better. And so I'm like, honey, just sleep, rest. You were at the ER all night, whatever. So I call him a couple times during the day. He's fine. Come home. It's Friday night. We're eating dinner. He's at the dinner table. We're eating. Now, as you know, the boys had acne. Okay. So I'm looking at Victor while we're having dinner. We were taken to a dermatologist. It didn't really help, but there's a point to this. They have acne. I'm looking at Victor. He has, it almost looks like a blister smack dab in the middle of his forehead. Okay, you know where I'm going with this. He got hit, right? Okay. But it looks like a blister, but it's almost kind of like pussy filled. So I'm thinking, well, it's just a really weird acne bump because he has all this active acne. But I keep looking at it during dinner time. And I don't feel good about it, Shauna.
Yeah.
Something in my heart is like, no, something's wrong. Something's wrong. And so that's Friday night. So Saturday comes. He wakes up. He has this blisters all over the right side. I think it was the right side. No, the left side. The left side of his face. It's horrible.
Oh my goodness.
Starts on the center of his forehead and it runs down next to his eye, down his cheek, all the way to the back of his neck. And it is raw and it's weeping. The blisters have broken open. There's fluid everywhere. And I don't know what I'm looking at. Jay takes him to the ER because obviously it hurts. He's walking and talking and eating,
Right.
but he's hurting. Same thing. They're like, you're fine. Go home. This is not fine.
Right.
This is. So Jay leaves the ER and goes to an urgent care. And they diagnosed him with impetigo. Okay, that was not impetigo. I know what impetigo is because I've had it. It's a bacterial infection. It gets very crusty.
Right.
Not to be gross, but that's what it does. That's what impetigo. And that's not what he had. So they change his antibiotics and they give him these different antibiotics for this impetigo. So that's Saturday. Sunday comes, he's becoming light and sound sensitive. He's beginning to shut down. My heart is telling me something's wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong.
Yeah.
So Monday comes. I call the doctor. They can't see him until Tuesday. Monday night, the wrestling coach calls. The other wrestler that hit heads with Victor has been diagnosed with a staph infection.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, oh, that's what's on his forehead. So it's Monday night. We go back to the ER because we have new evidence.
Sure.
Victor's literally shutting down in front of us for the first time because he had made it all weekend. He's not eating. He wants no lights. He wants no sound. And everything hurts. He's beginning to get a headache. He's got these blisters all over the place. So we take him back to the ER because it's Monday night. We get this information at nighttime. They misdiagnose again, send him home. We go to the doctor on Tuesday. She takes one look at him and is horrified, absolutely horrified at his condition. Horrified that we went to the ER 3 times and urgent care. Horrified that they changed his antibiotics each time.
Right.
He feels like he's coming down with potentially Guillain-Barré syndrome. She's just horrified. She says, I want you to go to Raleigh, which for listeners, Raleigh is our capital here in North Carolina. It's about an hour away from where we live. She said, I want you to go to Raleigh. I want you to go to Wake Med Pediatric. I want you to go to the ER. I'm calling ahead.
Yeah.
Don't even fool with this place. He
Right.
needs to. And so Jay is still at work. Andrew's got his Christmas program that night. I already told you Martin can't drive.
Right.
So I'm like, I need help. All of a sudden I have to take my child to an hour away to an ER. So all this is happening. And we get to the ER. They see him. They come back in an hour after seeing everything and hearing everything and reading the doctor's notes. And the nurse walks in to the room and she said, Victor, you've earned yourself a stay here tonight. We are admitting you. And she walked out to get everything ready to transfer him to his room. And he's sitting on the little gurney there, that you sit on when you're kind of in the ER
Yeah.
holding it. And he's real quiet. And he said, Mom, if I'm being admitted, that means I have to stay here tonight, right? And I said, yes. And I'm staying with you. And he immediately went, okay.
Mm.
And I'm assuming that because he was always trouble and inconvenient for his other family, that he thought that this was an inconvenience to me.
Yeah.
And again, I thank God for the words that left my mouth. He didn't even have to ask any other questions. I just said, yes, and I'm staying with you. And I did.
Mm-hmm.
And Shauna, I know you know the rest of the story as the readers will hear, but I will never forget that moment.
Right.
My vow to him was we would never leave him.
Yeah.
We would never leave him. And we did it. And the doctors could not figure out what was wrong with him. They felt like he had contracted a very unusual form of herpes called herpes gladiatorium. And wrestlers and boxers get it, and it comes off of dirty mats.
Mm.
And it makes sense.
It does.
Because he got hit in the head. He had that abrasion with the open skin, and it got in that way. And but he started having worse symptoms, and they could not understand it. And so Thursday morning comes, and they take him to do an MRI. And I went home. Jay came. I stayed with Victor 24/7. Jay came in and stayed with Victor during the MRI, and I went home. I drove home to see Andrew off. He was going to be spending Christmas with his dad. And I dropped by to see my students at school and tell them Merry Christmas. And right when I got back, I walked into his room. It was dark because he couldn't tolerate light. And within literally 10 seconds, it was so fast. Here comes the team of doctors. And I'll just never forget all the white coats. It wasn't one, it was multiple. They come in, they're really quiet. And you just kind of know that something's wrong. And they walk in and they said, they pull up the computer screen right there in the room and said, we have the results of Victor's MRI. They pull up his image of his brain and they start talking. And they said, here's his brain. And as you can see, this is his brain stem. And this piece that you see right here, this is a brain tumor. And it's about 3 centimeters in size. And unfortunately, this brain tumor has attached. It's attached to the brainstem. And at that point, the words just were there. And,
Right.
and I was thinking, here I am in this room with this child that's had nothing good in his life. And he's finally getting things together. And, and in my heart, I'm like, no, not my Victor.
Yeah.
Not my Victor. And I turned my head. I don't even want to make eye contact with him, Shauna. I just couldn't. And I'm standing at the foot of his bed and he's laying there in his bed. And Jay's sitting next to him. And one of the nurses walked in and she was rubbing his shoulder and his arm. She was just rubbing on Victor. And again, he's 16. But I turned and Victor was so strong. Most amazing kid. So strong. And I know it probably sounds cliche, but it really happened. He had one tear rolling down I think it was his left cheek. I can see it. Just one tear. And his eyes were filled with tears. And he had to bear this news. And I remember them saying that they couldn't help him at that hospital, but that he was too sick to go home, and that it was literally a 911 emergency. Like, he needed help now. And they were going to transfer him. And we got transferred to Duke University, which you think would be like the best of the best because it's how lucky are we to be close to Duke, right? And you hear these words and you don't think you're going to be the family to ever hear those words.
Yeah.
But here you are, and this is happening. And Victor spoke up and said, I want Martin. And we wanted his twin. And I excused myself immediately because I didn't know how to process what I had just heard. And but I knew I had to.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be weak. And I had things I had to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't know what they were. And I stepped out in the hallway, and Victor was kind of in a what's considered, like, I can't think of the right term, but because he did have that herpes laboratorium, he was in what's considered a no contact room. So there was like an air vac lock in his room. And there was a hallway that nobody was in because it was part of that air vac lock thing. And so I stepped out into that part of the hallway. So there was nobody near me, and there was nobody that would walk past me because I was sealed up by doors.
Right.
And I leaned against the wall, and I had to start making phone calls. And I did. And I couldn't even tell Martin what was going on. I called the pastor, and then I called the high school principal, and I said, I need Martin here, and I don't know how to get him, and I need help.
Yeah.
And he's going to want to know why, and I'm going to need you to tell him. I need you to tell him, or he could call me. But I don't know if I'm going to have time to even answer the phone at this point because it's a domino effect.
Right.
And so we got transferred to Duke, and I did not tell Andrew. I never called him. I never told him a word. I wanted him to not worry and have his Christmas time at his dad's family. And so we got transferred to Duke, and Victor got sicker and sicker and sicker because the brain stem had so much pressure on it.
Right.
And what we later found out, because a lot of questions come, did the hit on the head cause the brain tumor? No, the brain tumor had actually been there. Get this, Shauna, they think for the full year. They think that when we adopted them, it was already there.
Right.
And if we had not gotten them, what would have happened to my Victor?
Yeah.
And so they did the tumor resection on December 27th, 2013. And remember, their birthday is December 31st. So he was almost 17, not quite. And he went into the most incredible brain surgery. And I was worried that he was not going to be strong enough. He wouldn't be strong enough for the surgery because he was so sick. He was literally declining in front of us. And we never had Christmas. He didn't even know that it was Christmas at that point because he was shutting down. Mm-hmm. The last time he ate was Christmas Eve. He had a bite of hamburger, and he couldn't even swallow it. He just kind of spit it back out and kind of went back into his sleepy state. He couldn't stay awake, but he was in pain. And that night, I stayed with him the whole time, and I crawled up in that bed. Those hospital beds are very small, and I wedged myself up against the bed rail and him, and I held his hand, and I just stayed there. And Christmas Eve night, he asked me to get his cell phone. He had a Droid, a smartphone. Mm-hmm. I did not, and I did not want one. And he asked me to turn on, I don't know, like Pandora something, and play his worship music. And I'm like, who is this kid?
Yeah.
Because God, I don't know what you're doing here, but I don't approve.
Right.
And who is this kid to want worship music while he can barely hold his eyes open and he couldn't even eat and he's withering away in front of us? And he held my hand and he lifted with all his strength my hand up, and he audibly, verbally prayed for me that I would be able to walk through with strength whatever we were getting ready to walk through. And who does that?
Right.
But that's what Victor did for me.
Victor does that.
Victor does that, yeah.
The selfless, beautiful child.
And that is the gift.
Yeah.
This child that was never wanted and that was adopted on this weird, whimsical moment that didn't, like, I don't even know how that all happened. You know, you look back at it, it's like, what in the world just happened, right?
Yeah.
But that was the gift that my child Victor gave to me. So we went in 7:30 in the morning on December 27th, and I'll never forget. Anybody that has hospital experience, it's a solemn to the OR holding him. He was in tremendous pain, and I remember standing over him, just talking to him and holding his hand. And I said, Victor, guess what, baby? Today is a good day. And he had his Cape Fear. He loved his high school. He had his Cape Fear High wrestling toboggan over his head and pulled down over his eyes. He wanted to wear that hat. And so he did. And it was kind of pulled over his eyes to help block the light. And he had sunglasses on also. So he kind of had it over his sunglasses, and he lifted it up. And he pulled his sunglasses down. I could see. And I know, Shauna, you know this. He and Martin had the most beautiful eyes. You could see their hearts.
Yes.
And, you know, some people, you can see who they are through their eyes. And, you know, the eyes are a window to the soul, and my were they for my boys. And he looked at me. God, I'll never forget. He looked at me and he said, yes. I said, yeah, this is a good day. Guys, you're going to feel better today. They're going to get that brain tumor out. You're going to feel better, son. And they wheeled him away. He was talking about school. He started talking about school and wanted to know if his teachers would give him extended time to finish his assignments.
Of course. He's worried about school.
That's literally what he was saying when it came to and that was that.
I must stop you right there. You have so much more to share with us. Yeah. And I want to honor this time that we have together. And so I want to take a bit of a break right here, because this is a good place to stop for now. And we're going to come back. If you're listening, we're going to stop this. I'm going to post this recording, and we're going to come back on another episode, and Laura's going to finish her story, because I want to be mindful of Laura's time and yours as well. So, Laura, you have been so brave today.
Thank you.
You have been so brave. And I'm speechless that you have the strength to share this with us. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for about them.
Yeah. And sweet listeners, we're going to come back in another episode right behind this one. Hey, thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit follow wherever you get your podcast. And until next time, I hope you live in your space well, my friends.